Hello, this is an assessment for a Bechstein Model 9 made in about 1913. I'm just looking at it to see what kind of work might improve the piano. Clients mentioned particularly that one of the casters was missing, and in fact they're shepherd casters. These, if you look them up, you'll find that's quite common design of casters I think in the 60s, and really don't bear the weight. The piano is a bit too heavy for them really, and also they're very tall, which means that the pedals end up very high. I think those pedals are just above 8 centimeters from the floor, which is too far up from the floor really, and does mean that, as you can see here, the end of the pedal is worn a lot. Now whether the shepherd casters were on already or whether that was just a lot of playing, but they are too high, and obviously that will worn at the end at an angle, as you can see there. The case is rosewood in exceptionally good condition. You can see here, I think, where the candlesticks would have been. It shows up a lot more on the video than actually live. It doesn't look too bad, but they've obviously got rid of and filled up the holes and polished the whole piano, and generally looks good. It's obviously could do with a clean, and maybe there's a few things that a polisher could improve on, certainly, but generally I'm impressed by the quality of the case. There's no sort of fading, particular fading that catches the eye, as you often get. We often get the inside here where it's been held up all the time. That's a different colour, slightly different colour, I suppose, there, but it doesn't show that much. Certainly not a case for repolishing, I would say, and good rosewood. If it was repolished, it would look spectacular, obviously, but it's not too bad, and if it's a musician's piano, then to me that would be fine. It's just a bit on the dirty side. Here we can see some interesting, I would love to know a bit more, if you're watching this video, about the Aeolian Piano Company on New Bond Street. New Bond Street was a piano street. I think it was Chapels that was on New Bond Street, and here we have an H number. I'm not sure what that is. I did think perhaps it was a Harris number, but I don't think this piano was bought from Harris, and would love to be able to identify that. My Harris numbers only go back to about 25 or 23,000, so this one's older than that. I don't have it on my list, so I can't identify that really. So it's a Bechstein Model 9. We'll have a look inside now. Sorry, before we do, I forgot to look at the keys, which are ivory. That one looks as though it might have come off and been stuck back on because of the line, but it's in very good condition, and the ivories aren't chipped at all. They need buffing, really. They attract the dirt when they're not shiny, so if they're buffed up, and you can see they're a bit dirty, they would not attract the dirt, so buff them on a buffing wheel. That one may have come off as well, I think, and been stuck back on quite well. Usually the line's more prominent than that. You can see ones that have come off have got a stronger line. And looking at the felt at the back, I always look at that because that's a sign of if it has moth. It's so common to have moth in pianos, and this doesn't have any indication, any bits sort of eaten out of it, so no moth damage in the whole piano. I checked under the keys too. Looking inside the piano, we can see it's had some mildew here, so it might have got damp at some stage, but at the moment the hammers are quite free. The keys are not that free though. The balance rail needs lubricating. If you lift a key up, it should fall straight back down, as you'll get in new pianos, and we always lubricate balance rail with talc, with dry lubricant, and you can see they're all doing the same, so that will affect the touch. That will make it the touch more even and generally lighter. And it's been worked on before. You can see this tape's been replaced. That's a interesting way they've replaced that one. Actually, is just glued on the front bit to the back. But the tapes are working fine. You could obviously replace those, but wouldn't make any. They need it for a long time. It doesn't really need doing. If you're restoring a whole piano, obviously we do those. But if we're just trying to economize a bit and just do the important jobs that will really make a difference, then that's not an essential one. Some mildew here. These extra bass as fly dampers are very useful because they cut off the high harmonics, and so it's important to cut them off, and then the bass string can be quite resonant, and it won't resonate in sympathy here, which you otherwise will get. I'm sorry if I'm going a bit fast and trying to get lots of information in at once. And the regulation's surprisingly good. Someone must have regulated the piano. I'm not sure if these tapes are original or not. I ought to remember by now, but can't remember if those are original Bechstein tapes. But certainly someone would have, because they've lubricated here and they've lubricated under here as well. And generally the action is well regulated. If we if we push the hammers towards the strings, they're about 2/3 of the way, and they're all similar, and the let-off is late. By the way, the back check is very late, but that you have to have quite late back check on the models of Bechstein that have this extra spring. You see the extra repetition spring here, and it helps it to repeat, helps the jack to come back under. But what we found, and I think all restorers of Bechsteins find, that you have to have a later back check for them to work properly. Otherwise, that spring causes problems. Now you can see a reasonable amount of wear on the hammers here, but they sound beautiful, and I'm impressed by this model line. The break points on model lines here, you can hear it, slight difference. Generally aren't so good as you'd like them to be, and in fact a lot of Bechsteins have that problem with break point in the mid treble. And here, this is a common problem with Bechstein model 9s, quite a difference in tone. But it's good compared to most model 9s. The later ones here, and which is 1913, the early ones, which come out in about 1902, I do find more problems with the breakpoint and generally the tone. But this one is encouraging, really. And tuning pins are nice and tight, so we'll have a look at the worksheet in a minute, see if I missed anything out. But generally good, and the damper lift is generally good. Slightly earlier on the bass, but if we're restoring the whole piano, as I say, we were changing the dampers, we'd obviously get that right, but it's not making sufficient difference to worry us at all, I don't think. Now the piano is slightly flat but generally in tune, and you can see a new string here. I don't know if you can see on the video that coil there is newer than the rest. You definitely can see it, I think. So if we go up, that one and that one, it's the same string, it goes down and back up again. And if a string breaks here, normally you can unwind a bit on one side of the, push it round and wind it up on the other one, and you don't need to replace the string, which is better, otherwise the new string has to settle in, as you can hear here. So, but the tuning pins are tight, so that can just be tuned up, which I shall do in a minute. So I've tuned those two up now, and the tone of the strings is very similar to the old one, so that's encouraging. But as I say, normally we try not to change the string because otherwise the tone's different, but in this case it's been well matched, and the size of the string is really important. If it's slightly fatter, for instance, then the hammer will hit that string first, and it won't sound right at all. So the main work to improve the piano, obviously the bracing the casters makes sense really once if one of them's broken already. Pitch, raise and tune. It's not that flat, but obviously having a concert pitch is really important if you want to play with other instruments, and it will liven up the tone a little bit, and it's slightly out of tune here and there. Lubricate the balance rail, that will make a difference to the touch, because the touch is varying, as you can see here. 59 grams is too high really, 63 grams. And you've seen this many times before if you watch these videos. 45 is fine for middle C, perhaps slightly on the low side, 47.50, and it's varied, isn't it, because that up there it should be lighter if anything. So I think lubricating the balance rail first of all, and then if we need to, we'll have to just fine regulate the weighting of the keys. The other thing I noticed that will definitely make a difference to the piano is that the key dip is 12.5 plus, if anything. If we look at a key dip measurer here, this is 11 millimeters key dip, which would be the maximum we'd normally go down to, and if we push that down you can see it's disappearing. So I would think that's probably 12.5, maybe even 13 in places, and it's reasonably regularly the same actually. So that's obviously if you're used to deep keys and you like it, there's no reason why you shouldn't have that, in a sense that it plays perfectly all right. And I would say personally it's a bit too deep because I'm not used to having it that deep. Some keyboards, some electronics are quite deep, and the sharps are actually too tall. They're a little bit on the high side, so they could come down by about 1 millimeter. That's not going to affect it that much, but you might see visually they are a bit on the high side. It plays fine without doing that, but I think perhaps I would prefer it to be 11 maximum. So we might have to re-regulate some of the regulation if we do that, because obviously the key dip is important, so that it causes everything else to move, and if that's reduced you might have to change some of the regulation in general. So that's a Model 9 Bechstein upright piano made in about 1913, and I'm impressed with the piano. It's also polished very well, so what's unusual about it is the key dip is very great, but surprisingly not a huge amount of work would improve the piano. It's not one you'd have to fully restore, and then of course you make everything immaculate on the inside, but there's no need for that in terms of the playability. I would say definitely reduce the key dip and definitely buff the keys. That will, apart from the appearance of them, that will make them less attractive to dirt. And of course the casters, if they're changed, that's something you definitely need to do. Pedals are quite high and a bit uncomfortable to play. It's a beautiful mellow tone. It's the smallest of the Bechsteins, and also in terms of height there's a Model 10 which is straight strung and slightly taller, and similar piano, they're both similar pianos really, but in terms of Model 9s it's one of the very best I've come across, I think. And the tuning's very stable. Slightly flat, so we can pitch raise that. The touch feels a bit strange at the moment, it needs lubricating, and also the key weighting isn't quite right. So those are some things to do as well. So thank you very much for listening. If you've got a piano that you'd like us to assess, please do let us know. Drop us a line, info@robertspianos.com.